Yo, what is up, guys? Cool 412 the Fox here. Now, anyways, I know this review is long overdue, so I know last year I was supposed to do it along with Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, so I had to apologize for the very long wait on this review, so luckily, I think the wait was worth it, everyone. So since it's spooky season, I thought it'd be fitting to review one of the most, I would say, best indie horror movies I thought I ever see, from a wrestling fan to a horror movie fan fanatic like myself, under the name Wrestle, Massacre. Now, as a wrestling fan, I never knew about horror movies and pro wrestling movies being in the same spot at the same time. But for myself, it was kind of cool to find out about it. And my first iteration of it, as I mentioned on my last review, was Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies. But my amazement was, it was entertaining, but very confusing to the story plot and all. But anyways, before we start on this review, as you can tell on the poster, it's a little different from the others that are seen on the internet. Because due to YouTube's guidelines and everything else these days, I do not want to get into trouble with YouTube these days. So I thought it'd be fitting to use this just to play by the rules and I don't get into trouble. So anyways, before we start the review, the other thing I want to point out is if you've not seen this film, I highly recommend you skip ahead to the end of this video if you have not seen this movie. Because, caution, this film has a lot of spoiler alerts. So if you've not seen this movie, I highly recommend you check it out first before watching this, or if you just want to watch it and see what happens, or knows what happens in this movie. So, anyways, let's begin. This film, I would say at the opening, was kind of pretty cool at first, but as we get to the woods, we see a guy wearing a pair of wrestling boots, while a lovely couple were running in the woods, trying to run from the killer. But, come to think of it, they try to run, but then decided to try to fight back against the killer, who was a wrestler, but eventually that did not go too well for him, until upon finding out that he annihilated him with precision. And then I found out, oh my god, I don't want to point out what happens throughout these kills. So, anyways, he destroyed him, all I could say. But after the girl was running in the woods, only thing I could say is, in typical Texas Chainsaw Massacre fashion, he destroyed her. The only thing I could say is, the killer is portrayed and played by the son of the legendary professional wrestler by the name of the Cuban Assassin, which was passed down to him, aka Richie Acevedo, because this man has been through a lot in the wrestling industry and a pretty cool guy to talk to sometimes. And I got a chance to ask him if it was okay to do a review on this movie, and needless to say, I was very blessed and very thankful for that. So, anyways, after he did that, he walked away, and his character goes by the name of Randy. And then we cut to, like, a shorter backer part of the story and where it all started, like how it all began before all of this happened. Starting with a guy that was minding his own day, trying to relax, have a good time, until he got a phone call from the loan sharks. And yet, I didn't get the whole plot of it. I thought it'd just be like, either you pay up, or you lose everything. But it kind of got weird. But throughout after that phone call, his girlfriend came in by the name of Becky, was trying to find out what was going on. And out of everything, it turns out that he owed a lot of money, which were a total of $40,000. and they would try to figure out what to do, at least, on how to get it done. But they were in it together, and they were trying to figure out how to fight back against the loan sharks. But anyways, we then cut to Randy, who was at home watching TV, trying to watch wrestling. And that was when an ad popped up for a training facility by the name of the Woogie Boogie Man, Jimmy Valiant, who I think was one of the greatest legends in the history of the wrestling business today. And it's popped up on his training camp facility, and he written it down on a piece of paper, and he wanted to learn more on how to wrestle and be a professional wrestler like his dad. And by the time we cut to the next scene where he's starting to work, but before we get to that, there was another scene in particular that happened. We cut to a supermarket where an employee and a boss were having their talk until the loan sharks walked in, and shockingly enough, I recognized one of the professional wrestlers that made a brief cameo appearance by the name of the ECW original, the Sandman, the hardcore icon himself. I kind of knew it was him from the start because the kendo stick, aka the Singapore cane, gave it away. But anyways, it cut to the point where they wanted their money, that if they didn't pay up, then there'd be a problem. So anyways, then it cut straight to Randy working in the gardens, pointing out a lot about Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage. And yet, that was until the guy came in that was on the phone with the loan sharks. And he was kind of, I think, disrespectful to Randy, but he pointed out to him about his heritage and everything else. But that was until Becky walked in to try to let him know not to let people talk to him like that and everything else. But in the end, Randy had feelings for Becky, but it did not go too well. But anyways, we then cut to Randy still trying to do his job, and another brief cameo appearance by ODB, but I don't want to talk about this scene because this is kind of inappropriate. So let's just skip ahead and what happens next. Like, after he got caught, that was where it led to where he got punched in the gut, and he warned him that if anything happened like that again, he'd be in trouble. So, yeah, so I'd rather not talk about that scene. So anyways, we then cut to, I believe, where Randy was at home trying to relax, but actually the scene was he was outside with one of his co-workers trying to mention to be a professional wrestler like his dad, and this one appeared in a brief cameo appearance by none other than, last I checked, Hector Guerrero. But that was until upon finding out that Jimmy Valiant had his own training facility. But when he mentioned it to him, that was when he asked him if he wrestled in high school, and he said, yeah, I've done a lot of it. And that was where I was kind of stunned that they had a conversation about the business and everything else. So, anyways, that was where apparently we then cut to what looked like to be like where Randy was already at home watching things that went on at church. Then he fell asleep, but then the pastor talked to him about what he wanted to do with his life and everything else, but he was swearing in front of his face and everything else that was going on. And to my centralization, I was stunned, like, what the heck was I seeing? Was this a brain manipulation, or was this something pure evil. I was like, what was I seeing? But then after he fell back asleep, but it turned out it wasn't the pastor. It was something pure evil and demonic that looked like the devil. But out of everything else I've seen, I was stunned. So anyways, that was where it led to the next day, and he had to be led into the office by his boss and what happened throughout his performance at work. But I was like contemplating on what was going on in the scene, but then when I saw what was going on, they were complaining about his previous work and everything else that was happening. And that was where it led to where he was getting ready for seeing his friend Becky and the people he worked for. And by the time they got there at the bar, they were happy to see each other and everything else that was going on. Then that was where the guy ran right outside to try to get some fresh air, but then was run into the loan sharks again. But this time, it was in another brief cameo appearance in the form of Tony Atlas. And to my amazement, I didn't know what to expect. So, they warned him, either pay them, or it's not going to end too well. And their boss happened to be none other than Mr. Valentine. That's what they called him. So, I didn't know who this leader of the loan sharks really was in this whole ordeal, but eventually, after the whole ordeal with them, he went to get his girl, telling her it's time to go. But then, that was when he told her, more likely he told him was that he knew that he was scaring Becky at times when it came down to the situation, and he warned him to stay away from her and everything else. And it did not go too well. So, he went to Jimmy Valiant's training facility, and he wanted to enroll as a wrestler. But at first, the guy at the front desk was just like, thought he was just some kind of worker wanting to clear out the air conditioning and all that. But that was where he said he wanted to enroll. He said, enroll? As a student? Have you ever wrestled in high school before? And I was like, what the heck? That's the same question that the co-worker asked. But eventually he was just like, never mind, I don't want to know. So he paid every penny to train. But that was until Jimmy Valiant himself showed up. And Jimmy Valiant, I was stunned. That was a part of the film, but gave out his speech to the students and everyone else that wanted to learn more about the business. Until he wrestled Randy in the ring. So, I got a chance to witness some pure wrestling action in the ring, which was really, really good, but I was stunned to see Jimmy Valiant win the match. Then everyone at the training facility laughed at him and disrespected him. And one of the guys told him was, don't ever show your face around here again. And I knew this was where he got bullied a lot at work, and of course, oh dear, even at the training facility, he wanted to be a professional wrestler. I felt bad for the poor guy. But Randy had to go through so much disrespect and bullying. But in the end, that led to where he had to go through a performance review with his boss. And after going through the documentation of the paperwork, the boss looked through it. And that was where, instead of just giving him another chance, they fired him. But that was where, I think it was his son or something, but that was where he said was, I wish you luck, Randy, but I don't know what you'll do with it. But deep down in my mind, I felt like it was the ultimate show of disrespect. The man's trying to work, he's trying to do his job. I get that He was just trying to at least do what he has to do to, like, do the gardens and all that. What the heck? But then he went to see his father for advice, but that was until the father, I found out, was played by none other than Nikolai Volkov, which I was very stunned about. But Randy did not take it lightly when his father disrespected him, and Randy was angry, and something dark grew in him. And I was like, what am I seeing here? And then he choked them out and was done. I was like, oh my God, what did I just see? Anyways, never mind about that, but anyways, that was where Becky was at home, explained the situation with her brother, played by wrestling legend Rene Dupree, who is actually best friends, I was told, by Richie Esponesto. I was like, whoa, these two know each other. That's actually really cool. But it's really cool to at least learn a few things, but I'm very thankful to learn more about the wrestling business. But anyways, in the story, the brother was concerned for Becky's health and everything else and realized he still owed money from her boyfriend, but did not go too well when she mentioned the whole ordeal of Randy and everything else that has happened. And that's when she said, or more likely, that's when he said to her, Becky, don't let Randy back in. And she understood immediately, like, yeah, it's over. And so, basically, that was when we cut straight to Randy at home, upset about everything that has happened to him. Because he got bullied, he got disrespected, and nobody took him seriously. Until one day, something snapped. That I thought I was, like, seeing in the film, like, what the heck am I seeing? And then it cut to the next day where he was putting on his wrestling gear and everything else. I was like, okay, you got your boots on and your elbow pads and everything else. But when it got straight to the point where he went straight back to Jimmy Valiant's training facility and he took out everybody in his path, including the guy at the front counter that disrespected him. And then the two guys were going to fight him until one of them was scared out of his mind and was just like, I don't want to be a wrestler anymore. He's like, I'm out of here. My mom was calling me. I was like, oh, dang. Oh, this is something I thought I'd never see coming. Anyways, we then cut inside the training facility and Jimmy Valiant was counting his money at the front counter until he took him out, including everyone else in the training facility. And then he went straight to his old job and got payback on the people that disrespected him. But that was until Randy spoke in movie quotes, it looked like. I was like stunned, like, Freddy Krueger, eat your heart out. But that was where it got turned into like little piggies. But I don't want to talk about that scene, but he took out everybody in his path. And leading up to the whole day, he took out everybody and created his own championship belt. And it was, yeah, it was brutal. Shades of Leatherface. But then the next day, Becky and her boyfriend had their friends over. And that was where they talked about Randy and everything else that went on. And that was when her friend said, Randy's penchant for wrestling is very disturbing to me. And that was when I was like, disturbing? You haven't seen anything yet. But the whole ordeal was, they had their talk about everything going on and they went to get drinks. Well, of course, Becky's brother was at home contemplating the situation with his girlfriend and everything else that was going on. But the whole ordeal, I don't want to talk about it. It was kind of inappropriate. Anyways, we then cut back to the guys talking about the situation where they needed the money to pay off the loan sharks, but there was a knock at the door and she thought her brother was there. When they opened it, they got an unexpected surprise from the loan sharks. And then we got a chance to see Mr. Valentine for the first time, and I was like, whoa, okay. I didn't see this coming. But then that was where they demanded their money and wanted everything they needed, or else it would be more problems for him and his girlfriend Becky. So they went to the safe, and Randy showed up from out of nowhere and took out one of the loan sharks. And then he showed Becky the championship that he won. And that was where he realized there was one more piece missing. And I knew what he meant. Oh my God. Anyways, I don't want to get into that, but what happened was she texted her brother and what happened. When he got the message, he got everything he needed and got the heck out of there. And brought his girlfriend with him. And then we cut back to the scene where Randy disappeared, and Mr. Valentine was wondering what the heck's going on. So he sent the other guy out to find what happened to him, but when he got there, he looked outside and Randy took this guy out next. And it was pure wrestling fashion. I was like stunned out of my mind. He kicked the gun from, like he did a big boot on the gun and knocked it out of his hands and took him out. But I was like, oh my God, this is brutal. But then we cut to the scene where Mr. Valentine was realizing how impatient he was getting about everything. So he sent the same guy out there to find out what was going on. And when he got there, it got turned into a straight up wrestling match. But I realized there was no ring, nothing but pure grass and everything else. And to my amazement, I was like stunned out of my mind. Then he annihilated him and destroyed him afterwards. And that was when he said was, "Lights out, rock star." Put the sunglasses on him. And I don't want to talk about what he did next, but anyways. That was where it led to where Mr. Valentine realized it took too long, and he brought everyone out to see what was going on. And then he saw that his best man was destroyed along with everyone else. But when he got out there, he wanted payback on Randy for what happened to all of his men that were destroyed. But by the time they were fighting each other, it looked like a straight up wrestling match. And then afterwards, Mr. Valentine was down and out and beat. And he got the garden shears and he was pleading with him that he has another spot for him if he didn't do this, but yet, let's just say he destroyed him afterwards and he was done. Because I don't want to talk about what the kills were, like I've already mentioned earlier. But it's kind of brutal. So anyways. And that was where the friends tried to run, but he destroyed them both with steel chairs. More likely with a steel chair. I was just like, what is this? A TLC match? But I was stunned. And yet, it was brutal. But then Becky was scared out of her mind after what happened. That was where the boyfriend had enough and realized if he wants a match, he's going to get a match. But as the fight raged on between the two, it got turned into a straight-up wrestling match, all right. But Randy was climbing the ladder, and so was him. And so was the boyfriend. But that was where Randy basically destroyed him as well. Picked up a rock. And yeah, annihilated him and he was done. And he said was, "She's mine now." I was like, what the heck? So Rene Dupree's character came by and had a gun with him and was trying to wonder what the heck was going on. The girlfriend got out of the car, he went to investigate, and then the girlfriend, oh my God, she got destroyed and she was done. After being grabbed by the, I don't want to talk about it, just, oh my God, brutal. But anyways, as we cut straight to the next scene, Becky told her brother what was going on and everything. Then her brother ran outside and saw Randy. And then the fight broke out between the two like in a wrestling match. So Becky picked up the gun and did what an Arnold Schwarzenegger reference from True Lies. And she said to him with the gun, "You're fired." And after that, the same demon from before realized, No, why are you done? We're not through yet. But Randy came back to life, and he knew, and more likely, she didn't know what was going on. I was stunned out of my mind seeing this, knowing it was the ending of the film. But yet, after the brutality and all the horror wrestling type action deal mix-up, it was like if Mortal Kombat met WWE and did like a crossover type thing, which has happened before, if I'm not mistaken, in a video game on cell phones. But not like the brutality we saw in this movie. But in the end, she tried again, and we cut to black, and the movie's over. But overall, after watching this movie, I was like confused at first on what the plot twist and what the story was all about, but then after watching it, I was like, oh my God. Like I said earlier, this is like if Mortal Kombat and WWE had a partnership or something like that, if they met. But overall, the kills in the film were kind of cheesy, but they were really good. But the only thing I'm going to say is, if Dead Meat has any chance of reviewing this movie and doing a kill count on it, I highly recommend they do, because it's got straight up wrestling action and some familiar faces that they might recognize. And yet, it'd be really cool if Dead Meat did some kill counts from Pro Wrestlers vs. Zombies, and of course Wrestle Massacre. Because these films, I think, deserve more recognition than they rightfully deserve. Because this is the indie horror movie fan base where you don't know where to expect from great storytelling, and yet I think some great movies need to be reviewed like this. But anyways, overall, this film, I think, had a lot of great potential for a sequel. And I looked it up on the internet, and originally it was going to happen, but no resolves and no updates yet. But if this film ever does get a sequel, I would love to see what happens next, along with everyone else. Because I think Wrestle Massacre really, I think, told a good story of wrestling and horror combined. I give this film a solid 10 out of 10. Because I think this film has basically almost made me lose my breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but part of the jokes there, folks. But I think the storytelling was really good, though, a little bit, but just a little bit, I'll give it that. But anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this horror movie review. And with spooky season still happening right in the middle, I think of one of the greatest times of the year of Halloween. And there was no time that didn't reveal Wrestle Massacre at a time like this. So I want to apologize for the very long wait on Wrestle Massacre. If you fans, well, if you guys are at home watching this, please do not watch this movie unless if you're ready for it, because it's kind of brutal. and a little cheesy. But anyways, with Halloween already here, to anyone that has a bit of wrestling fan base or horror fan base, I would say this is the movie for you. So please do check it out if you want to. But that's entirely up to you. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching this horror movie review. Once again, I want to apologize for the very long wait on Wrestle Massacre, and I think this wait was already very worth it. And I want to thank the Cuban Assassin, aka Richie Acevedo, for the opportunity for me to review this movie. And if you guys want to check out his YouTube channel, it's under the name The Cuban Assassin. And if you find his YouTube channel, go subscribe to him and tell him that 412 Films Productions sent you. And tell him I said what's up. And yet, don't forget to like this channel, give it a subscribe button, turn on post notifications so you do not miss any more upcoming videos. And yet though, folks, with a lot going on, and yet it's already been, I think, one of the greatest times of the year for October. And yet with Halloween fastly approaching, who knows what could happen. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to tell my friends I said, what's up?